And hello YouTube. So this is Thomas Judge back once again, and I'm doing an actual just self-contained reading guide today, which I suppose isn't related to DC Rebirth and the things I've been doing, but it is one that's useful for me to get out of the way. Today I'm going to look at the Murphyverse. Now I did mention this in the last video that I put out when I was talking about DC Black Label, and I pointed out that the Murphyverse was something that I'm considering to be exempt and out of scope for my DC Rebirth guide. Not least of all, it started being published before Black Label launched, yet it is a Black Label series and has retrospectively been pulled under that umbrella. And in addition to that, the Murphyverse has continued being published for several years after DC Rebirth ended, and in fact is still an ongoing thing. As well as that, it's completely self-contained and is its own little universe, a little bit like, the Millerverse and things like that. So what I thought I'd do today is just give you a quick overview, run you through a reading guide, because there are a couple of things about the sequencing, especially for the deluxe editions here, which is actually and unfortunately very important to be aware of if you are interested in diving into the Murphyverse. And then I thought I'd close out just very briefly with my thoughts of what the Murphyverse is like. Is it any good? Is it worth reading? That sort of thing. I won't dwell on that too much because I know none of you care about my opinion, and it does involve Batman, so all of you are going to read it anyway. But on that note, what is the Murphyverse? So the Murphyverse is like an unofficial name given to a line of comic books that was made by Sean Murphy, who's like a writer-artist. He was an artist first, and now he's taken up writing. And it was published by DC under the Black Label imprint. Like I say, it started in 2017, but was subsequently pulled into the Black Label banner, the same way that some Vertigo titles were subsequently dragged under that umbrella, or that Mr. Miracle was published pre-Black Label and is now a Black Label story. And there are other things people call it. You can call it the Sean Murphy universe. You can call it the White Knight universe or the Batman White Knight universe. But ultimately, I'm just going to call it the Murphyverse. That's what a lot of people call it. So, as I say, self-contained universe. It does rely, or rather it does capitalize on existing knowledge about Batman and about the history of Batman, much the way that most reboots do. Much the way that, for example, the New 52 kind of relied upon you knowing certain things about Batman, so that when they were recontextualized and rebooted in the New 52, you'd be like, oh, that's awesome. The Murphyverse has a similar sort of thing going on. We'll dive into that in a second, but to start off with, I just want to show you here these 6 rules that Sean Murphy laid out as the rules that anyone else that was going to be writing or illustrating within the Murphyverse had to follow these 6 rules, because whilst he's so far been the architect of the whole Murphyverse, he's very open to other writers and so on like diving into it and doing their own thing on it, even if that's outside Batman as well. So in the future, I think there's a plan for there to be a Superman spin-off, a Wonder Woman spin-off, all in this Murphyverse dynamic. So the 6 rules that Sean Murphy laid out are as follows. The first one, any character that dies cannot be subsequently resurrected. That's a good rule. I always had mixed feelings about the resurrection of Jason Todd in mainline DC. I mean, they made it work, but I was very skeptical. That said, Sean Murphy basically fucks himself over on this one, because if you do read the entire Murphyverse, later on he does kind of cheat and bring back a character that died, which frankly was lazy and a bit of a cowardly get out, really. And the fact that this was one of his original principles and it's the first one and he shits all over it is, well, it's not great. The second principle he has for all the writers that are going to follow him, I guess, is that there can't be any internal monologues. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Strange, but fair enough. I mean, again, he gets around it by having people like narrate to their journal and things like that. And if you want to go down this kind of epistological route, you can do. I don't know if that's a good thing to have no internal monologues. I'm quite a fan of them, but whatever. Rule 3, no series can be rushed. Yeah, a lot of brave talk, but ultimately DC editorial is king. Sean Murphy, to be fair, hasn't rushed any of his series, but who knows what it's going to look like in the future. Rule 4 is pretty hippy-dippy. The authors of the books must have as their primary focus the goal of pleasing their readers. I mean, surely that would be the rationale for any author. Although that said, actually, I mean, I'm an author. I've self-published some books, and my goal is not pleasing my readers. My goal is just telling the story I want to tell. So actually, yeah, maybe he's got a point there. Rule 5, there must be at least one vehicle, such as the Batmobile, in each comic. Cool. And rule 6, no series may cross over with another despite taking place in the same shared universe. So a Murphyverse story about Superman shouldn't be crossing over with Murphyverse Batman stories or White Knight stories. I don't think that rule is going to stick. I think that when the Murphyverse carries on growing and DC decide they want a nice milky cash cow, they're going to do a crossover. And sure, Murphy's not going to say shit because they'll just give him enough money to kind of like grin and bear it. To be fair, he's already kind of broken rule 1. So, yeah, whatever, Sean Murphy. So anyway, generally about the Murphyverse, like I say, it's so far pretty much focused entirely on Batman and like his supporting characters. Obviously, the main character for the very first arc actually is really the Joker or Jack Napier, that variation of the Joker, and Harley Quinn is in it and other characters are in it that I'll talk about in a second. But there is, like I said, the plan to have other characters like Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, all that sort of stuff going on. In that sense, it's a little bit like the Absolute Universe, which I know everyone is obsessed about because, of course, Batman. But it's a bit like the Absolute Universe, but it's a separate thing. It's just its own self-contained thing. So that's the overview, like an intro for the Murphyverse. What I want to do now is I'm going to talk you through a reading map that I made. Yeah, obviously, it's me. I'm Thomas Judge. Reading maps, reading guides, that's the thing. I'm going to talk you through it, specifically because there's some things about the sequencing of some of the issues that you may not find out elsewhere, and I think is worth pointing out. So with no further ado, we're going to skip over to the reading map. And here we have it. This is my map of the Batman White Knight universe. As with all of these things, at some point I'm going to stick them up on the website. But right now, like, this is all it is. And it's not very complicated, so I've got no urgency to kind of put it out anywhere officially. But I'm going to zoom in. Let's have a look at it. It pretty much all almost fits on one page. Sort of. So, logo there on the left. But this here on the right is the map. So this is the reading order, and as you can see, there is an issue in the red box here. But let's just dive straight into it. At the top, this is the first series, Batman the White Knight. As you can see, it is an 8-issue series. These are the covers for the single issues, written and drawn by Sean Murphy. So this collects issues 1 to 8. That's the entire series. I have to stress, this is definitively a different continuity to the main one for a couple of reasons, irrespective of the events actually in the story. There's the fact that Jason Todd was Robin before Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson was actually Robin second in this particular continuity in the Murphyverse. Also, Duke Thomas turns up in the Murphyverse, and for those of you that know Duke Thomas from the New 52 and DC Rebirth, in this, Duke Thomas is a full-grown man and a former US Marine, and basically pretty stacked. So quite a different character in some ways. I mean, he's still black, he still lives in Gotham, he's still called Duke Thomas, but very different in some ways. In terms of what this series looks like in terms of collections, you've got the single issues there. And then this one here is the cover of the trade paperback, which is fine. It's also available as a hardcover, which is exactly the same size, standard trade paperback size. That's available as well. And then they also released this, which you can see here, Batman White Knight, slightly larger. And this is the deluxe hardcover. So it's the same size or height of an omnibus. And it's got a dust jacket, and it's just really nice, basically. There is an Absolute Edition. If you don't know what an Absolute Edition is, you can just Google it or find it on Amazon. But that's even larger and even nicer with a slipcase. But Batman White Knight is the only series in the Murphyverse right now that has an Absolute version. So with that out of the way, let's look down to the next series. The next series is this one. So this is Curse of the White Knight. Whereas the first one, White Knight, came out 2017 to 2018, this came out 2019 to 2020. So very definitively a black label, as you can see from the branding on the issues here. Now, in terms of this, it's, again, written and drawn by Sean Murphy. You'll notice I've done this weird thing here with this Von Fries issue. That's because the way the story works is you have these 6 different single issues, issues 1 to 6 of an 8-issue series. Then there's a one-shot, which is called The White Knight Presents Von Fries, which goes here. And by the way, Sean Murphy has confirmed that, and that's the way it's also done in the trade paperback collection as well. And then after Von Fries, you've got the final 2 issues here, which is issues 7 and 8. This is one of those stories where, like I say, you don't need to know previous Batman mythology, but if you do, you'll be like, oh, this is cool, Easter egg. So essentially, this story, in the first issue of it, introduces Azrael, Jean-Paul Valley. Now, if you don't know who Jean-Paul Valley or Azrael are, they're from the Batman Nightfall arc from the mid-90s, awesome arc, awesome character. That's the start of my personal Batman reading. His depiction in this and what he is and what he does and the whole thing is very different. But yeah, like I say, Murphyverse alternate continuity. In terms of collections, this is collected here, and this is the trade paperback. That's also the exact same cover and design as the hardcover edition, which is also standard size. And then there is a Curse of the White Knight deluxe hardcover, which, as you can see, has got a similar kind of dust jacket design to the other one. So I actually have the deluxes, really nice, and again, it's the same size as an omnibus on your shelf. All right, so that was Curse of the White Knight. Now we look down to White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, which is this series here. So this came out 2020 to 2021, again written by Sean Murphy, but in this case it had art from Matt Scalera. The collection itself contains issues 1 to 6, which you can see here, and then it has an excerpt from Harley Black, White and Red, issue 6. Now just to clarify, Harley Black, White and Red is actually a digital first comic, and as I mentioned before, I'm not including digital first as part of the Rebirth continuity. In fact, I don't really mess around much with digital first comics, even if they're subsequently collected as trade paperbacks. Harley Black, White and Red is subsequently collected as a physical trade paperback. I wouldn't massively recommend it. I'm obviously not a Harley Quinn fan. This story is in it, which is kind of cool. And there's also a story in it by Stefan Chazek as kind of an epilogue to the Harleen series that he wrote, which I talked about last time. That is the only reason I'm tempted to pick up the trade paperback, simply because that story is in it, and Harleen is, as I mentioned last time, one of the best comics ever written in the history of ever. What you'll see here is I put it the way it's collected in the trade paperback. You've got issues 1 to 6, and then you've got the Harley Quinn Black, White and Red single vignette from chapter 6 of that digital series. If you're reading it properly, if you're reading it in singles, I'd recommend reading it as the Black, White and Red vignette first, and then issues 1 to 6. And the reason I say that is the vignette is set before the Harley Quinn series, and in fact the last page of it does specifically say to be continued in The White Knight Presents Harley Quinn #1, which I'll show you here in fact. So in terms of that, that's how I personally would read it. But if you get the trade, it's going to be collected in this sequence. This actually also, this series also confirms Joker's origin as Jack Napier, which I mentioned earlier in the video. In terms of how it's collected in a trade paperback here, and that's the trade paperback cover, and that's also a standard size hardcover as well. You can see a green line going off to the side. We'll get into that in just a second. But before we do, just be aware it's available as a trade and as a hardcover. Scrolling down, we then have the next series, which is called Beyond the White Knight. This came out from 2022 to 2023 and written and drawn by Sean Murphy, so he's back drawing it again. As you can see here from the sequencing, this contains issues 1 to 4, and then after issues 1 to 4, there's actually a 2-issue mini-series called Batman the White Knight Presents Red Hood, and that's issues 1 and 2 you can see here, which I've dropped down in the sequence just to kind of make them pop out a little bit. Now, that was written by Sean Murphy, but drawn by Simone DeMeo. And it's important to note that that's where it comes. You have to read that 2-issue miniseries after issue 4 of Beyond the White Knight. It's not a separate thing. It's collected in the trade paperback. God knows why he didn't just make this an 8-issue series, but he didn't. And then here you've got the rest of Batman Beyond the White Knight. So you've got issues 5 to 8 there. Now, if you're wondering what this essentially is morphing the Murphyverse. That's a weird way of phrasing it. Yeah, morphing the Murphyverse to actually blend in and include Batman Beyond. Yeah, Batman Beyond, which itself is its own kind of separate continuity. And I've done a guide on the DC Beyond universe, while this brings it into the Murphyverse. I don't view this as being part of the DC Beyond universe, by the way. This is just Murphyverse stuff. So issue 1 introduces Terry McGinnis, Derek Powers, and the Batman Beyond super suit. If you know the cartoon as well, it's exactly the same, kind of dynamic there. Issue 3 references the Von Fries issue, which we talked about in the Curse of the White Knight series. And the very last issue here, issue 8, says to be continued in Generation Joker, which is the next series that we're going to look at. But before we look at that, let's just have a quick look at how this is collected. So Beyond the White Knight is collected as a trade paperback with this cover, and that's also a standard size hardcover with this cover. I know there's a red line coming off it. We'll talk about that in just a second when I talk about the colossal DC fuck up in this area. But before we get into that, let's go right to the bottom. This is the final and most recent Murphyverse series. This is a White Knight Presents Generation Joker 6-issue series, came out in 2023, written by Sean Murphy. It's got art from Mirka and Dolfo, and it's just 6 issues, 1 to 6 in a row in that sequence, no messing around. And it continues to introduce like a range of reimagined DC characters, including at the end a bit of a teaser to someone outside the Bat family, so kind of hinting towards the expanded Murphyverse DC universe. So I've sort of flirted around this, but let's have a quick look at this now. With the Generation Joker, we've got this as the trade paperback, and that's also the cover of the standard size hardcover. But now, as I say, a line comes out of that, and let's have a look at what that actually means. So you can see it here. I've zoomed out a little bit. There is a deluxe edition here, which is the White Knight Presents Harley Quinn and Generation Joker Deluxe Edition combined. All of those issues, all 12 of them, are in this one here on the right, they're in this particular oversized hardcover edition. And as you can see, you've got the same kind of design with the white banner on the left and the picture on the right and so on. So in your collection, this would look really good. Sorry, I'm zooming in and out, but this would look really good with your White Knight Deluxe hardcover, your Curse of the White Knight Deluxe hardcover, and then you have the Harley Quinn Generation Joker Deluxe hardcover. You can obviously see the problem here, and this is an issue I refer to as the DC intern. So the DC intern has struck again. Basically, Batman Beyond the White Knight is a critical part of the story set between Harley Quinn and Generation Joker, and there isn't a deluxe edition for that. Moreover, rather than doing a deluxe edition for Harley Quinn and a deluxe edition for Generation Joker, they've combined it. So even if there was a deluxe edition for Beyond the White Knight, you'd have to read it halfway through reading the Harley Quinn Generation Joker Deluxe Edition. So annoying. Right now, at the time of writing, if you want all these in a hardcover, what you're going to have is you're going to have the first 2 as a deluxe hardcover. Then you're going to have the Harley Quinn Generation Joker Deluxe hardcover. You'd read half of it. Then you'd read the standard size Beyond the White Knight hardcover, which is annoying. And then you finish reading your deluxe hardcover here in the Harley Quinn Generation Joker one. Alternatively, to be fair, what you could do is just read the trades. You could just read this trade, this trade, this trade, this trade, this trade, or you could read them as standard size hardcovers. If you're a fucking peasant, you want to get the really good ones. You want to get the big ones. And in that sense, it's also annoying that Absolute White Knight is only this particular volume here, and Curse and none of the others have been made into Absolute editions. At this stage, I wouldn't trust DC to make it into Absolute editions because they'll probably fuck them up in this way. They'll probably do one for the Curse and then one for Harley Quinn combined with Generation Joker, which we do not want. So this is a bit of a mess. This messes up my collection, and as a result, because I'm the custom bind guy amongst the other things that I do, I was thinking, right, I'm going to make myself Beyond the White Knight as a deluxe oversized hardcover. But wait, at time of filming, which is early April 2026, DC have just announced and solicited that they're going to do a Beyond the White Knight deluxe oversized hardcover, which is great news. I'm not going to give them too much credit because they should have done it about a year and a half ago, but they're fucking idiots. And so I'm not going to give them too much credit for finally realising that the collections on the shelves look stupid. But at least they're doing it now, which is great. I've already pre-ordered it, and I'm looking forward to having all 4 deluxe oversized hardcovers for the Murphyverse on my shelf. That'll be awesome. That said, me being me, and possibly you being you, what's then going to annoy me is the fact that the reading sequence is out of kilter, and I'll have the first 2 deluxe hardcovers up here, and then after reading that one and then that one, I'll have to read half of the Harley Quinn Joker one, then I'll have to read this, and then I'll have to read the rest of the Harley Quinn Joker. What I may end up doing, and I'm not promising I will do this, I'm not promising I won't do this, I may end up at some point in the future splitting this deluxe hardcover into 2 very slim oversized hardcovers to sit on either side of my Beyond the White Knight. I suspect I'm probably going to do that because that's the kind of bizarre obsessive compulsion I have when I look at things on my shelf. So, with no further ado, that is the entire reading guide. I hope it's helpful. I hope it at least clarifies a couple of things. I think there's a few points here worth noting, not just my slightly unhinged rant about oversized editions and the DC intern being useless and so on. But I think the important things to keep in mind is the fact that the Von Fries one-shot goes here. Black, White and Red goes at the end of the trade paperback, but really technically should go at the front of it. And that the 2 Red Hood issues are part of Beyond the White Knight and go directly in the middle between issues 4 and 5. And I think if you haven't read it before and you're putting together your own sort of, you're buying the issues or you're buying the trades or doing whatever, I think it's important to know that just so you don't fuck up your reading. Otherwise, it's very clear, it's very coherent, it's very chronological. Right, let's zip away from the map. And what I'll do is I'll just talk through really kind of my thoughts of the Murphyverse. All right, so with the obligatory kind of reading map overview out of the way, thanks for hanging in there, and thanks for still listening to this bit. This is me literally just talking a bit about my opinion, so feel free to just skip it and ignore it. But if you are interested in my opinion, it is as follows. The Murphyverse started out really strong, but shows quite a change in tone and feel over its run to date, or so far. The first volume is great, it's brilliant, and it's well worthy of the absolute treatment. It's a really thoughtful, introspective dissection of the relationship between Joker and Batman, and it does involve a lot of modern politics, and if you don't like politics in your comics, well, there you are. If you don't like politics in your comics, but you do like The White Knight, the first volume of it, then maybe you do like politics in your comics, and this is a way of finding that out. But generally, that entire first series considers the nature of Batman's one-man war on crime, and more specifically, asks the question of whether or not dressing up as a bat and assaulting poor people pushed into criminality and causing millions in property damage are actually the actions of a hero. For those of you, I know there are actually some of you, and thank you for it, who have read my series No Gods or Kings, there are several scenes in that where characters discuss the fictional character of Batman and whether or not his actions are heroic or not. So I personally thought this was really, really interesting. Obviously, I'd written mine first before the series came out, but it's a similar sort of theme and I liked it, and I really liked the first series. I would have happily picked it up as an absolute if there were no other Murphyverse comics, but because there are, I wanted to have consistency in the formatting, so I've adopted the deluxe oversize format for my collection. Speaking of which, the second volume, Curse of the White Knight, also great, really enjoyed it. Not as good as the first, but still really strong. But after that, the Murphyverse starts to undergo a bit of a shift in tone. And by the current and most recent arc, Generation Joker, it's essentially devolved to nothing more than just an interesting Elseworld story, full of comic tropes and action set pieces. And it doesn't have much thought or nuance and consideration behind it anymore. It's kind of a pastiche of itself, which is a little bit annoying because it started off so clever and self-contained and intelligent and self-aware. And now it's just kind of like, oh, this is just another Elseworlds comics. It's kind of Batman Beyondy. He's got a few randomer things in. It's okay. Sean Murphy's broken some of his own rules in terms of what the Murphyverse is. And like, to be honest, those rule breaks or those transgressions are evidently to the detriment of the story. You'll know what I mean when you read it. But yeah, and it's just like, okay. Am I going to pick up more of them? Yes, obviously, I'm going to read them. I'm going to buy them. I have them as oversized hardcovers because I'm an idiot. But nonetheless, I don't even know if I recommend it. I definitely recommend the first one to anyone. I think it's great. The second one, I think, is very good. Not as good as the first, but very good. And then the rest of them, I wouldn't really recommend them to people, to be honest. I know everyone's going to read them because it's Batman and everyone's obsessed with Batman. But yeah, no, not really very good. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I'll leave it there. Listen, I'm not going to harp on about it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this self-contained reading guide was useful. I'll stick it in my playlist with the other self-contained reading guides. The map is going to go up on my website, No Gods or Kings, at some point in the next couple of weeks where I can get around to doing that. I need to restructure the website a bit for a few reasons. Thank you for watching. As always, if you do want to support the channel, the best and in fact the only way to do that is to go onto Amazon and just pick up my novel, No Gods or Kings. It costs 99 pence or 99 cents. It's really good. People comment in these videos saying that they bought it, they read it, and they enjoyed them, and they've enjoyed all the ones in the series because there's 4 so far. It's incredibly flattering. It's incredibly motivational. Thank you for taking the effort, those of you that do. Those of you that don't, well, fuck it, you don't have to. I'd like you to, but it's up to you. And thank you very much no matter what. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video was useful. And as always, stay classy, everyone.